The Minneapolis area saw another night of angry protest over the killing of Daunte Wright, the unarmed black man, just 20 years old, shot dead by a white police officer during a traffic stop Sunday. This is new video into us overnight from the suburb of Brooklyn Center. Officers firing gas canisters and flashbangs at hundreds of protesters who had surrounded a police station and defied a 7 p.m. curfew. The second night of protests follows the release of an officer's body cam video that shows the fatal shooting during that traffic stop. Now, we're going to warn you, it is disturbing footage to say the least. We're going to play some of that video, part of the recording where officers struggle with Daunte Wright as they try to arrest him on a warrant. And one of them warns she's going to use her taser, but instead, she pulls out her gun.
It is my belief that the officer had the intention to deploy their taser, but instead shot Mr. Wright with a single bullet.
Daunte Wright was 20 years old and the father of a 1.5-year-old son. The officer who killed him is identified now as Kim Potter, a 26-year-old veteran of the force. The protests are happening just only about 20 kilometers away from where former Minneapolis officer Derek Chauvin is on trial for murder in the killing of George Floyd. Our senior Washington editor, Lindsay Duncombe, was looking at all of that for us this morning. Lindsay, let's begin with the latest on these protests and what has been happening in and around Minneapolis in that suburb. What is the latest this morning?
Well, certainly another tense morning after a tense night. As we saw there were several confrontations between the protesters and police. The officers said that they fired tear gas at protesters after the officers had been hit by projectiles. Those projectiles included bottles, fireworks, and bricks. That's according to a tweet from Operation Safety Net, the group of law enforcement agencies that came together in the wake of all of the concerns about potential unrest related to the Derek Chauvin trial before people were even reacting to this latest police shooting. And 40 people were arrested last night as a result of those confrontations between police. And what is exacerbating the anger for many of the people on the streets of Minneapolis is the police response itself, particularly on Sunday night, the first night of protests in relation to Wright's death. There was a feeling among protesters that the response from police was too much force to deal with these people who have gathered in anger and in grief. And grief is very much a part of what we're seeing in Brooklyn Center. The mother of the child, Wright's child, spoke yesterday about what she's feeling. Here's what she had to say.
He just made you feel better when you came around. And I'm just hurt that he's gone. Like, I can't believe it. He loved his son, and like, that's not fair that his son can't have his dad in his life. Can't really believe that this happened. So, like, I'm still trying to, like, process it.
Some of the things that the protesters, Heather, are calling for is the firing of the police chief and the city manager, as well as the officer who is currently on leave because of Wright's death. A decision on charges, whether or not charges will be laid, could come in the next few days.
And Lindsay, just to be clear, because I think I misspoke, the officer you mentioned, Kim Potter, a 26-year veteran of the force, not 26 years old, 26-year veteran of the Minneapolis police force. Now, these are protests that are going on, as we've mentioned, just about 20 kilometers or so away from where Derek Chauvin is on trial for the killing of George Floyd. That trial nearing its end. The prosecution has wrapped up its case. What are we expecting today?
Well, now the witnesses that will be called to testify are those that are making the case in the defense of Derek Chauvin. And listening to the testimony over the past couple of weeks, the questioning by the defense lawyers of the witnesses brought forward from the prosecution, we know that the case they're going to try to make is that it wasn't the knee on George Floyd's neck by the police officer Derek Chauvin, which was the cause of his death. Rather, we expect that the defense lawyers will argue that there were other factors at play, including the drugs in his system, in Floyd's system, as well as underlying health conditions. We've also seen the prosecution witnesses repeatedly try to sort of pre-butt that argument with their own experts. But if we look at this, what we're expecting to happen in Minneapolis right now, Heather, is the arguments, the witnesses defending the police officer in this case to play out over the next couple of days, closing arguments and a charge to the jury early next week, likely Monday, then deliberations and a verdict at the same time now as we wait for whatever action will be taken in relation to Wright's shooting. So a very tense and sad and angry time in Minneapolis, and those feelings being felt right across the country here in the United States.